Hello YouTubers. This video comes in response to a video that was uploaded by Goomley Boy, Frank, over in Britain. And several times before, Frank and I have communicated and have seen how similar his growing up years in Britain, in England, were to my growing up years here in the southeastern United States. Just several things. Just every time he tells a story, and sometimes when I tell a story, we find a lot of things similar in our younger years. And the one I'm responding to, he told about growing up on the farm and what the house was like and what their living conditions were like. And here again, I found so many similarities. But what I thought I'd do is go back in and make a video of my own, telling of my years on the farm. His were back in the early to mid 50s, and mine also. The years we lived on the farm were early to really late 50s. So I thought it would be interesting to compare his video to my video and just see all the things that were the same, even though we were half world apart. He was across the Atlantic Ocean, and I was deep down in the Southland. So I'd like to start by telling you about the time we moved to the farm and the conditions that were there, and kind of the living conditions we had while we lived on the farm. To make mine a little bit worse, we had lived in a city, a small city, where we had all the conveniences before we moved to the farm. But my dad bought a farm on Sand Mountain, which was at that time and still is somewhat more rural in our county. And it was a 20-acre farm, and on this farm was a rough four-room house, a barn, I think it had a chicken coop, an outdoor toilet, an outhouse, and that was about it for facilities. At the time, there was a well on the property out behind the house, but the well had no electric pump in it. It was a hand-drawn well, a hand-drawn bucket. There was electricity in the house, and it was mainly used for an electric range and for electric lights, and that was about it. And as I remember, I would have been about 9 years old when we moved to this house, and it would have been about 1953, 54. I don't remember the exact year. But I think that we went in and did some improvements to the house before we moved in, because it was in very rough condition. There was a family living in the house in those rough conditions. But I can remember going in either just after we moved in or prior to moving in. And all that was in the house was, like I said, it's a four-room house made of concrete block construction. There was only a subfloor in the house, which is just a rough floor that's normally under other finished floors. As I remember, there were partitions in the house, but the partitions were covered with pasteboard, cardboard, like comes in big boxes, was what was on the walls. No sheetrock, no improvements on the wall. And I think the ceiling had some kind of, I think it was like a wood lath ceiling. I don't remember a whole lot about the ceiling, but I know it was unfinished. And like I said, there was no plumbing inside the house because there wasn't any pressurized water, any running water. And that was the conditions we moved into in the house. Of course, the sheetrock was put up and finished. The walls were covered in sheetrock. There was no insulation in any of the walls, the floor, or in the attic, so it was completely open to the outside. The house had a tin roof on it, a metal roof on it, which didn't provide any insulation. And as I remember, we installed no insulation. We just did finish it off, put a better floor in, an oak floor. At that time, oak flooring was very inexpensive. It's one of the more expensive flooring nowadays. At that time, oak flooring was very inexpensive. And as I remember, we put the oak flooring down, which would have made a beautiful floor if it had been finished. But the thing to do then was to take the wood floor and put what they called at the time linoleum. It's kind of like vinyl is nowadays, but it was an older product called linoleum. a man-made product rug, I guess you'd want to call it. It's what was put down on the floor. Anyway, that's the conditions we moved in that house in about 1953, 54. And I seem to remember that my dad did put a pump in the well, which would pump the water up, and there was a faucet outside, and I think there was a line run into the kitchen. It was the only running water in the house. At no time while we lived there, and we lived there for 5 or 6 years, was there any inside bathroom facilities. And I have a video way on back. I replied to Peter over in England about southern outhouses. If you want to know about outhouses, you can go back and look at that one. I won't go through that again. But anyway, that's the condition we moved in this house. Had a living room. When you went to the front door, it was a living room. Back behind that was a kitchen. Off to one side was one bedroom, and in front of that, in front of the house, was another bedroom. No hall. You went from room to room, and went out of the kitchen into the bedroom, and out of that bedroom into another bedroom. You could walk all through the house, out of that bedroom back into the living room. And I remember while we were there also, my dad did pour a concrete front porch and I believe back porch, and I think he screened in the back porch where the well was. I think it was poured in concrete and screened in, so that was a little bit of an improvement. And that's about the only improvements I can remember. There was no electrical heat in the house, for sure no central heat or anything like that. We had a big, I think they call them warm morning heaters, one big one in the living room, which was used to burn coal, and there was a smaller one, a flat top one, in the kitchen. I think it was also called a warm morning heater that would burn either coal or wood, and it had a flat cooktop on it if you needed to heat water or things like that on top of this flat stove in the kitchen and heat up water and things like that. The fuel for burning in these two stoves was either wood or coal, and mainly coal. A truck would come out from a nearby town and dump a big pile of coal in the yard, and you always had to keep kindling around wood. And one of my jobs, or my brother's jobs, was to take larger pieces of wood or board and chop it up into smaller pieces to make kindling out of. And the kindling was used to start a small fire, so you could get the coal. You had to have a certain temperature fire to get the coal heated up enough to burn. So that was what you started the coal up with. There was always kerosene around, and kerosene was used to wet the wood to make it light easier, kind of a petroleum product. Back in those days, people call it coal oil, and it's actually, nowadays they call it kerosene, but it was a petroleum product used to help start fires. And one of our duties was to go to the coal pile. It had a scuttle, what they call a coal scuttle, and take the coal scuttle out to the coal pile, shovel in some appropriate amount and size of coal, and bring it in and have the coal scuttle sitting next to the stoves, the heaters, so that you could keep them. You had to replenish the coal supplies that burned down. You had to carry out the ashes. There was an ash door in the bottom, so you had to get the ashes out, carry them out, and dump them, and keep a coal supply inside to keep the thing burning. And as Gumley, I think he calls it, Gumley boy said, the 50s seemed to be colder in England than it is now, and for certain the 50s were colder here than they are now. We had some very, very cold winters during the 50s. And this farm was located on a plateau that's in this area that goes up about 800, 900 feet above the valley land here, and it's even colder because it was on top of that mountain. And plus there was cold winters that made it even worse. Matter of fact, while we lived there, we had one of the biggest snows, and this is very rare for northeast Alabama, but we had a snow one winter late in the 50s that left 18 inches of snow on the ground, and it stayed on the ground for about a week. And we lived through those conditions, heating with those two cold heaters. And Gumley boy also mentioned that when you got a fire going, those things get terribly hot. They'd get so hot that if you had the lights low in the room, you could actually see through the metal sides of those things, because the metal in the heater got so hot you could see the coals inside. So it got terrifically hot. A coal fire is very hot. And as long as the side that was facing the heater, you were fine. It was too hot, really. But it was so cold in the room and no insulation that all the heat was being zapped to the outside that you would be cold and chilly on the rest of your body except what you would face the heater. And I can remember us gathering around the heater and standing close and kind of rotating like a rotisserie to keep front side, back side warm, because if you didn't, one side would be too hot and the other side would be too cold. On very, very cold nights we did that. And another thing is when bedtime came and everybody went to bed, nobody wanted to sit up and mind the heater. So sometimes, not always, but on cold nights, you'd put extra cold in the heaters before you went to bed, and it'd last a while, but it would burn out before it got daylight. And inside the house, anyway, when you got away from the kitchen and the living room where we had the two heaters in the bedrooms, it was cold anyway. And by the time morning got there, it was as cold inside the house as it was outside the house. Like I say, no insulation at all. And usually the children's duty a lot of times was to get up and start the morning fire. You always started the fire in the kitchen first, because that's where you'd be taking your breakfast and everything. So somebody had to get up and start a fire, and it took a while to heat up much at all. And like I say, it didn't heat the house. It might heat the person a little bit, but it didn't heat the house good on cold days. It was just cold. And then if you go to summertime, we had no air conditioning. My dad did build a fan, a window fan. He actually built it. He bought a blade and came up with a motor, and he built a frame and put this thing in the window. And it would move air through the house in the summertime, not cool air, whatever temperature the air was outside, but it would move a little air through some. And I can still remember that old thing rumbling in the window at night. I guess being home built, it wasn't balanced all that good, and it would rumble, but it was better than sweating all night trying to sleep with it in some of the hot, humid southeastern United States nights. It helped some. And Gumley Boy also talked about wash day, and I'd like to say a little bit about that. And we're talking about washing clothes. Since you didn't have a lot of running water in the house, we had no electric water heater. I guess couldn't afford it, didn't want to pay the electric bill. So all the water that was used in the household, for whatever reason, washing clothes or washing people or anything else, had to be heated either on the eye of the electric stove or in the wintertime on the top of the coal stoves, which a big pot, you set a big pot on it and heat it up, and that's the way you got your hot water for washing dishes or washing people or whatever. But I can remember my mother outside, a better way to heat the water, a lot of water needed for washing, was they had a big black cast iron pot out in the yard, and it was set up off the ground so you could put pieces of wood, kindling under it, build a fire under it, and actually heat that big pot of water with that wood fire outside for clothes washing and such. And we had an electric washing machine, but all it amounted to was something that ran a agitator. You put the clothes down in the washing machine, and it would slosh them about, much like a modern washing machine does. And it would somewhat wash the clothes. And then it had a hand wringer. I remember a hand wringer on the washer. When you pull the clothes out of the old washer, you ran them through a hand wringer, which got most of the water out of it. And then, of course, there was always a long clothesline in the backyard, and they took the clothes and hung them on these lines and let them air dry. No clothes dryer for sure. And I remember an innovation back in those days. The men and the boys wore blue jeans a lot, and Mother was always a stickler for ironing all of our clothes. She even ironed sheets that went on the bed and things like that. And a real innovation came along. They were called, I believe they call them pants stretchers. And it was metal racks that when you wash jeans or pants, you could slide these right down inside the legs of those jeans, and it would stretch them out. And when they would dry, they would look somewhat ironed and even have a crease where you put that metal frame down in the legs of those jeans. And that saved her a lot of ironing, I know. But anyway, that was a wash day, and it wasn't easy. It was an all-day job. And I can remember she still had a rub board, a scrub board, a hand rub board at that time, and I guess maybe some things that were extra dirty or the white things or whatever, I can remember her taking and scrubbing those things on that rub board to get it cleaner, I guess, than what the old washing machine would get. But that's the way it was. A completely different time from what it is now. And I told in one of my early videos, we did have television at that time, so we had a little entertainment, had a radio. We didn't have a telephone at that time, no telephone at all for those 5 years that we lived. I don't know if they even had a telephone along that road at that time. And this area would have been a country road, a dirt road or a gravel road or a rock road, whatever you want to call it. Wasn't paved at that time. And it was still back in the days when if it rained hard, this was a sandy area. I can remember getting on the school bus and the bus sliding off into the ditch on the way to school, and the bigger boys would have to get out and help the bus driver if they could, get the bus back up on the road and get on to school. So I just wanted to compare those things with Goomley Boy. There's one more thing that he talked about, and I'll talk a little bit about too, and it was almost an exact description of how we did it. And he talked about when you need a personal bath. And then those days, because it was so much trouble, I guess, so hard to get, couldn't just go in the bathroom and take a shower or bath. Although we did it, and in summertime rig an outdoor shower, and we actually put a big tub up top of the roof and let us heat up the water. And when we'd come in the afternoons, we'd go out in our shower. I think we had a coffee can with a bunch of holes poked in it, and the hose running from the tub up above, and you could actually get a warm shower out under our country shower we made. But anyway, back to the inside baths, especially during the wintertime when it was so cold. We had a big, it's hard to describe as a galvanized tub. It's about half the size of a normal bathtub like we have now, but shaped sort of like that. It was oblong, I guess you would say. So a grown person could sit down in it if he pulled his legs up. He could sit down in it. And ours was used in the kitchen because it was next to the electric stove, and also next to the wood stove when we wanted to heat water on the wood stove. And you would take water from the well and use some cold water, and then temper it with water that had been heated on the stove to bring that up to bath water. And you always kept water heating on the stove so you could add to it as the water cooled down. And the pecking order for taking country baths were the young people in the family, and the girls and women in the family went first. The boys, the older boys, and the men went last, is the way it went. And I guess that was a good way to do it, because maybe the men and the older boys were dirtier than the women and the younger children. But that's the way it went. And the first one had a nice clean bath. But you'd notice, and if you had a big family, I guess it got even worse. We had 4 in our family. But as each one took a bath, the scum, the soap scum, and the color of the water got worse and worse. And the last person to get the bath, I don't know that it did him a lot of good, because he was having to wash in pretty dirty water. But we didn't have any bad effects from that. We ate good. We didn't have any fancy food. I was telling somebody the other day, the first true steak, I'm talking about a good steak, like a T-bone or a sirloin, was the first true steak I ever had. I bought myself after I got out and got a job when I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. Before that, we had of course we had bacon and ham and eggs and all the things you could grow on the farm. And we ate a lot of beans and cornbread and potatoes and biscuits and things like that. But I could just go on and on about those farm days, but I know I'm getting way up there in time already, so I don't go on too long. But anyway, bath day was an experience you'd never forget. And I'm going to attach this as a response to Goomley Boy's video, because, like I said, we had so many things alike, and I'm sure we'll find more as it goes on. And it's just amazing to me that I could grow up in the rural South, and he grew up in, I guess it was rural England, about the same time. He and I are about the same age, and have so many things alike. You always think about Europe being completely different from especially rural America, but we found out through getting to know each other on YouTube that that's not necessarily true. We had more in common than we would have ever imagined. And that's one of the great things about YouTube. It's bringing people together and letting them know things about each other they would have never known any other way. It's a great service.